or afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining today. We're going to be going through our Google Sheets connector for XTM Cloud. It's just a few minutes before the hour, so I'm going to give a little bit of time for people to get joined up, and then we will begin. Okay, so I don't want to keep you too long on a Friday. So we'll get going here, and people are still joining, but that's absolutely fine. So yeah, thanks once again for joining. My name is Amanda Luer. I'm an expert here at XTM, formerly known as Solutions Architect. We did a bit of a rebrand. So if you hear the word expert, that is us. We'll be going through the Google Sheets connector for XTM Cloud today. Shouldn't be too much of a time suck, probably around half an hour. You guys go ahead and ask any questions that you'd like as we're going through in the chat or the questions box. Know that you are muted for the duration of the webinar, but I will be checking questions as they come through and what we're looking at today. So let's get going. What we'll go through today is looking at how we get the add-on for the Google Sheets connector, how it is configured. We'll take a look at the two different types of translation that you can kick off using the connector through Google Sheets. We'll run a round trip using the connector, and there will be dedicated time at the end of the webinar for questions, but as I said, just go ahead and shoot them over as I'm talking. If anything comes up, I should be keeping an eye on those as we're going through things. All right, started. Close that one down, and this is a sneak peek. Okay, so the connector for Google Sheets in XTM is going to be downloaded through an add-on in G Suite. So in Google Sheets, I have a Google Sheet open here. All you have to do is search for, here we go, XTM, and it should pop right up for you. It's XTM Connect for Google Sheets. You can go ahead and install it. So you can install it, of course, without access to the connector. To get access to the connector, we do need to turn it on for you in an internal configuration. So if you'd like to trial or test this connector, go ahead and give our support guys a shout, and we can get that set up for you because it does need to be enabled in your XTM account. But that's basically it. You search it up, you install it. So once it's installed, it should be available here in your list of add-ons. You can see XTM Connect for Google Sheets. And I'm just going to go ahead and open it up. I'm actually going to disconnect because I was already pre-connected. So this is what it'll look like the first time around. And it'll just need you to input a little bit of data so that it gets synced to your XTM Cloud account. So for me, I'm going to input my XTM Cloud account name. This would be what pops up when I log into XTM. My username. And actually, I had saved a different password today, so I want to make sure that I input that right password, because I know it's not pre-saved in my Google there. One sec. There we go. All right, and then we also just need to input your server URL. My XTM Cloud account is on cloud. I don't have a private server installation, anything like that. but it's just going to be your basic URL when you log into XTM Cloud. So unless you have a private cloud account, you just pop in what I popped in here, xtmcloud.com. When you first connect, you can also define a default customer name or ID. It's optional. So if in your XTM Cloud you have a specific customer or TM that you're going to consistently be using for translations going through Google Sheets, you can predefine that here at this level. I'm not going to do that because I want to make sure that we can show you the different options for selecting customers and so on. That's basically it. Then you hit connect to XTM. And now I'm connected. So because I'm connected to my cloud, it's going to actually give me a list here of my customers that I have in my account. And I can select which one I want to create a translation for. So I'm going to select my Word Nerds Marketing customer. And it's going to bring us to the next panel here. There's two ways to send translations through the connector. We can send column data. So we're going to specify specific columns here to send for translation, or you can send an entire sheet. And we'll go through both of those and what they look like when they're sent for translation. But we'll start off with column here. So right below this, you'll see your source and your target, and you can define which columns in your sheet that you're looking at represent basically what your translatable text and what you want to have correlated to your target language or languages. Actually, for this example translation, I'm going to send it out to 2 different languages so we can see what that experience might look like when it round trips. So for my source column, it reads the sheet a bit, so it understands that column A is my English source, and that's correct, how I want it mapped. And for my first target, I want to map it to column D for my French translations. Now, these names, I just happen to name them French and Danish and what they're going to be. Of course, they could have some custom name. Doesn't really matter what it's named there. What does matter is how it's mapped then using your XTM languages. So this picks up that my source language in XTM is going to be English US. And then these are the available languages for that customer in my XTM account. So I need to define what this column D is going to actually map to in XTM. So it's going to be French for France. So that's one language pair that I have set up, and I'd like to add another for Danish. I'm just going to click my button there. English, still the same, and now I'm going to configure for my Danish. I'm going to select my source language here for XTM, and then also my target. And you can add as many as you want. We're just going to do 2 for simplicity's sake. Obviously, my source content is not extremely complex or complicated. For our webinar today, we're just going to be looking at sort of core functionality, and then you might envision how you could use it in application. Okay, source target languages, those are defined. In the next chunk here, we have 2 additional options, and for demonstration purposes, I'm going to enable them both so we can see the full capability of the connector. I'm going to select to add comments. So similar to how we defined the column and how it will map for picking up the content, when we select to add comments, you can also define then the comment or the column in which it needs to read. So for me, I've decided that this is some translation data, but I want to add some additional context. So, you know, extra info for the linguists as they're doing their translations. Maybe there's some specific instruction that needs to be considered while you're doing the translation. Anything really can be placed there. And when you define that, so it's going to be my B context column. There's this little ellipses that will also pop up. If you select that, you can define how that's going to be visible to the linguist in XTM when they're doing the translation. So you can add them as comments. So in XTM, there's in XTM Workbench, there's different docked panels where you might see your TM matches, historical data about the translation, the TM entry, concordance search, and one of those things is a comments column. So you can add segment level comments to view, or you can add them as a new column. So this is actually one of the functionalities that can be employed with some of our file filter templates, previously known as analysis templates, depending on what type of context you wanted to have added. But it's more like a custom configuration that can be done. But in the Google Sheets connector, it's quite cool that we can just select to have it added as an additional column in XTM Workbench. Won't be translatable. It won't impact your word count. It won't, add to anything like that, cost-wise or whatever. It is just going to take that data and present it on the same segment level for the linguist. So we'll select that. That's cool. Again, if you have multiple, you can define that there. We'll just do the one for today. Another thing that you can define here is the target length for the translations. So actually, as you can see, I have a max target length for each of these segments. I just put some random numbers in there. Particularly handy when you're translating UI text or something that needs to fit in a very specific space. You can make sure that that information gets passed at the segment level, individual segment level, to the linguist so that they don't go over or under the required translation length. So I've added that. I'm going to define, the column, max target length, that I want to be used for that. Go to the ellipses, and you can see here you can configure min or max in what you want to do. So I've selected max, so I'll keep that there, meaning that the amount of characters used for the translation should not go over 20, 250, and 500 respectively. Right. So the next chunk here is that you can define a project template to be used within XTM under your customer. So I'm going to select to use my marketing workflow. This list, keep in mind, this list is going to be populated by whichever customer you select here. You may or may not be familiar with templates in XTM, but it's basically a way for you to pre-configure and pre-select all of your project settings, your target languages, your how you want your ICE matches or leverage matches to be handled, your workflow, the steps, who gets pre-assigned in terms of linguistic resources. So much can be captured in a project template, which allows for automation during project creation. And those can be stored under individual customers or globally in XTM. So right here, we'll see that this one's available under this customer. And that's it. You can also define a due date. Sure, we'll put one in Monday. And time, if that's important. These buttons here, I want to talk a little bit about as well. So for this sheet, one of the options that you have with the connector is that you can save all of these settings as default. So the next time you open this sheet and say maybe additional content's been added underneath here and here and here, whatever. When you pop open this sheet, it's going to remember that because you set it at as the default for this particular sheet. It can come in handy very much so when you have let's say a handful of sheets, 5, 10, 15, 20 different sheets, different departments are working on, different teams, whatever. If they're using the connector, they don't need to go through the motions of setting these up and defining these each and every time. You can also restore that if you wanted to wipe it clean. Or the other option here is something that we have called a configuration template. So maybe you don't want to save anything as default for the connector. That's cool. So the other option you have is that you can export these configurations and have them handy to import the next time that you want to pre-populate something. So if I open that up, it's a simple JSON file, and it's a representation of these configurations and mappings that we've defined in the connector in JSON format. So without, maybe you don't want to have the due date saved for the next time, that's fair enough. But at least your source language is defined, your target languages, what column location, comments, and all that good stuff that we went through and defined. It can be saved and reused at any given time in the future. So if you were to pop a brand new sheet open, you don't have any default settings, all you would need to do is scroll down to the bottom here and import that configuration template. And so we'll do that once we send this for translation and take a look at what we want to in Workbench. While it's round tripping, we'll do that with a different sheet. Okay. You can toggle down this advanced setting, but there's just one setting under here. You can wipe out all of the memory that's associated to this particular sheet and settings and all that good stuff. Yeah, so that's it. So let's go ahead and just request that translation. This is important. In order to do that, you can pick and choose. Otherwise, it's going to send everything. So if I were to just send it now, it would send everything in column A. That's totally fine. Otherwise, if you just highlight the certain text that you want to send for translation, it'll send only that. So just a note about sending content or selecting content. I'll send that over. Okay, project created successfully. While it's in translation, we will put some placeholder data here. Big, bold, capital letters, scary, do not edit. Hopefully nobody edits it. If they do touch it, then it can break the connector, more or less. So hopefully that's enough to keep people away. But the project was created. So I'm going to hop over to my XTM. You can see I was playing quite a bit with this earlier. Just going to give it a quick refresh. So here at the top, this is actually going to be the new project that was created. If I open up the general info, you can see that my customer was selected. My project template was selected. If I scroll down, all of these, when I was talking about project templates earlier and pre-configuring your desired settings, this is what is going to be applied automatically for you, which is great. You can navigate to your metrics, your statistics. Today's not talking about using XTM Workbench or project management or any of that good stuff. So we're just going to pop over into our workflow right away. And you can see that the users that I had, excuse me, pre-saved in my template. I had some pre-saved for French, but I did not for Danish. So in my project template, these users were pre-applied, but I had not selected anybody for French. That's totally fine. We'll pop this open for French. And I'm just sort of going to, actually, do you know what? Let's machine translate this really quick because I don't speak Dutch or French. It's for everybody's benefit. Yeah, I'm just going to turn on a machine translation engine for this content, save it really quick, and then reanalyze. It should take just a minute. So I'm going to make sure it's done. Okay, great. All right, so let's open XTM Workbench. Great. Okay, so my machine translations, you can see based on my settings, I had them pre-populated in the target. What we're looking at here is that context that we defined should be in its own separate column in XTM, which is cool, right? So it's giving me my source content, and it's also telling me that additional context that I selected. The alternate, so I was talking about a docked panel. the alternate option that I had was for it to be present down here in a comment versus its own column. So if you were to select the other option, it would be present down here. And you'd have a little text bubble on the segment level telling you that there's a comment. Another thing that we're seeing is that it's red, right? And I'm getting this notice saying check the length of a target text. We did this on purpose, right? My max length that I defined for that first segment was 20 characters. That's quite few. So I knew it was going to give us an error, but it was on purpose. It's going to say, we don't like that translation, check it, and make it shorter. So basically, sure. Now that it's shorter within the, within the 20 characters, it's 17 actually. So it's within that range. The error has gone away. Yep. Yeah. So those are the two things I wanted to point out here, that when we define that context column, it popped in as its own thing over here, which is great, as well as the character length restriction on a per segment level. You can see this one's 500, 250, and then 20 respectively. So it's pretty cool. So pop this one closed. I'm just thinking, I'm actually just going to force finish this so we can round trip it and look at the sheet. So I'm going to force finish this. Obviously, there's no linguist assigned. Obviously, we're also not doing any real work here. My machine translations should start popping back through here once that signal is sent that the project is finished, and we'll see that in just a moment. So in the meantime, we'll look at the other option we have for setting translations, which is per sheet. So I just took some content here from our release notes for 12.8, and which is fine. Again, this can be any information that you have, but the per sheet translation option is going to be just that. It's sort of a coverall, a blanket. It's going to take everything in the sheet and send it out for translation. The difference is in the per column option, you define where you want your targets to land. With the sheet option, it creates a new sheet, like a duplicate, right? But in the target languages that you've selected. So for this one, we're going to say, okay, my customer is the same. Excuse me, my target languages will be, I don't know, German and Polish. And same thing, I'll just turn marketing workflow, that's fine. And yeah, I'm just going to request a translation. You can see how it's working, what the difference is when that translation was requested. It created now a new sheet for German and a new sheet for Polish. So it just took everything that was present in that sheet and duplicated it into target languages for you. Same thing. It's going to send over to XTM. Each language is actually going to get its own project. Multi-language option is not something that's currently supported for the connector, so just keep that in mind if you're testing this out. You can see we've got a project for German and a project for Polish, which are going to be that. So the same thing, it'll round translations, your presets, your configuration, your template, all that good stuff. It's going to go out for translation. When it comes back, then whoever needs to access the Polish translations can just pop open the Polish sheet, and there it is for them. We round tripped with columns, so we're not going to, and there, you can see it live. So we're not going to do it for the sheet. So now those things came back through, so we can see that we have Danish translation and we have French translations. Note that the 20 character target length restriction, that was overridden, but that's only because I forced finish the project as a project manager. When the linguists were working that red error, they would not be able to override that, more or less, because it wouldn't be in agreement with the 20 character restriction. So side note there. But yeah, we've got French translations, we've got Danish, everything looks good. That's how we can do that. So the last thing that I wanted to show you is how you can then just quickly import that configuration sheet into a new sheet if you need it. So I'm just going to copy this real quick, create a new spreadsheet. Because the JSON that I'm going to import is based on this structure, right? So I'm just going to keep it as it is. Yeah, it doesn't need to be pretty, huh? And we'll take the headers here. Okay, so it's a new sheet. I'm going to go ahead to my add-ons. I'm going to open XTM Connect. It's going to tell me there's no default settings for this spreadsheet. That's expected, right? None of my presets that we did in the previous sheets are selected. I can go down here to import. I can grab my configuration that I exported from this one, import it quickly, and everything's done for me. Voila. It's pretty handy. Again, that's only if you want to upload these configurations ad hoc. Otherwise, you can save it as a default. So it's just going to remember that when you open a sheet and the connector that you want these to be the default translation configurations. So yeah. That is pretty much it in a nutshell. Yeah, the only little nuancy things that I wanted to make sure I pointed out was that when you're sending content for translation, you have the option to, it will just take the whole column if you don't select cells, but you do have the option to, select just a few and send that for translation or something that you have there. The options for context, and then, yeah, how to send a sheet translation. Oh, I see that there's a question here. 1 second here. The additional columns for context information are great. Is it possible to include this functionality, import data and additional columns also for file formats? Yeah, so good question. This option, we're talking about the context column. Oh, wait, hold on. We didn't define that in one of those. It was the multi-language. Workbench. It is possible to, depending on your source file. So like if you're asking about XML, or maybe you have a properties file or whatever, there's usually something that we can do in terms of adding additional context column or columns, depending on the source structure. So what you can do is I would just log it through support, so our file config specialists get it, but with a sample source file and then defining what you'd like to have added as context from the source, and then they can set that up for you. Right now, it's one of the things you might know that in 12.7 and 12.8 we added the file filter builder, or file filter, where there's a UI element for creating your own custom analyses templates or file filters. That's one of those features that's going to be built in support for Excel, as well as for other file formats once we continue building that out in future versions. So I think the next file format maybe that's being added to that is XML, but I could be wrong on that. Definitely something to check through the wish list on our roadmap, because it should be definitely defined there. Yeah, so yeah, just send your source file over and let us know what you want to find as your context column, and our team should be able to set something up. You are welcome. Another question here. What does XTM check in order to establish there's a default template for a certain sheet? Does it look at the file name or the file structure? Good question. So actually, I think it has to do with these little cell IDs and that information. So it recognizes that there's default settings. If you're using the full, if you're using like the overarching defaults, like if you remember when we first connected, you could select your preset customer. It uses that. It recognizes that you want all projects to be used or are created under that customer. But yeah, it has to do with the guts of the operation, that it's able to remember what settings and presets that you want applied using the connector.